Hi first graders, today we're going to read a nonfiction story called Chameleons Are Cool, and the author's name is Martin Jenkins. It's illustrated by Sue Shields. So today, as we read this story, we're going to practice answering questions about key details in the text. And being able to answer these questions is going to help us to think more deeply about the information that's presented in the story. So before we read, there are a few words that I want us to get started with. The first word is peering, and peering means looking. Like if someone is peering over the fence at you, it means they're looking over the fence. The next word that we're going to hear is odd, and odd means strange. And the last word that we're going to hear is fixes. Now this type of fixes doesn't mean to repair something, like I fixed my broken bookshelf. In fact, it means that you're going to focus your attention on one thing. So the chameleon fixes its eyes on its prey means that it's staring at its prey. Its eyes are fixed. So those are the three words that we're going to hear as we read the story. And remember, as we read, we're going to be answering questions about those key details in the text. So let's pay close attention. Chameleons are cool. Chameleons are lizards, and lizards are reptiles, like snakes, crocodiles, and tortoises. There are about 4,000 kinds of lizards altogether, including around 120 different chameleons. Just over half of all the types of chameleons come from Madagascar, a big island off the east coast of Africa. Most of the others live in the mainland Africa. The title page, Chameleons Are Cool. Some lizards eat bananas. Chameleons don't. Some lizards walk up and upside down on the ceiling. Chameleons can't. There's even a lizard that glides from tree to tree. A chameleon certainly wouldn't do that. Gecko's toes are sticky like Velcro. So the gecko's a lizard. That's why it can go upside down. The flying lizard glides on wing-like flaps of skin. Iguanas don't just eat bananas. They love all sorts of fruit. But of all the different kinds of lizard, I still think chameleons are best. Chameleons are cool. It's not that they're all that big. The biggest is only about the size of a rather small cat. It's called Austerlet's chameleon and lives in Madagascar. Whatever their size, chameleons usually get sick and die if kept as pets. They're much better left off in the wild. So, as I was reading, I was thinking about the information that was presented in the caption for the picture, and I was wondering if chameleons are better off as pets or in the wild. And the information that I just learned by reading is that they're better off in the wild because if they're kept as pets, the author says that they can get sick and often die. They can be really, really small though. The smallest one could balance happily on your little finger. It's called the dwarf berkesia and lives in Madagascar too. So now I was asking myself, before I even read, I wanted to know where chameleons lived, and now I know from the information that I read and the details that they live in Madagascar. And I suppose you wouldn't exactly call many of them beautiful. Their skin is wrinkly and bumpy, and they've got big bulgy eyes, while lots of them have the most ridiculous noses. I think it's their noses I like best. Their mouths are pretty odd too. They turn down at the corners, which is why chameleons always look grumpy. So now I'm wondering if you can answer the question based on some of the details that we read. Why do chameleons always look grumpy? What is it about their faces that make them look grumpy? Actually, they don't just look grumpy, they are grumpy. So if two chameleons bump into each other, things can get pretty lively. There's lots of puffing and hissing, and sometimes there's a real fight. A chameleon will fight only with the same kind of chameleon as itself. And that's when chameleons do what they're most famous for. They change color. Lots of people think chameleons change color to match their surroundings. They don't. They change color when they're angry, or when they're too cold or too hot, or when they're sick. So I just learned some new information that I wasn't aware of about chameleons. So I'm wondering if you can tell me when chameleons change color. When do chameleons change color? And there are some sorts of chameleons that hardly change color at all. As a rule though, chameleons don't bump into one another all that often. I suppose it wouldn't be fair to call them lazy, but they certainly don't move any more than they have to. And when they do, it's almost always incredibly slow. A chameleon's feet are shaped like pinchers for holding on to branches tightly. Sometimes they stop completely in mid-step as if they've forgotten what they're supposed to be doing. But if you look closely, you'll see they're actually carefully peering about. Now, peering about is something chameleons are rather good at. That's because their eyes can move separately from each other, unlike our eyes, which always move together. Most of a chameleon's eye is covered in skin, like the rest of its body. There's a tiny peephole in the middle that the chameleon sees through. So, while one eye is looking back over the chameleon's shoulder, the other one is scanning the branches ahead. As soon as it spots something tasty, the chameleon fixes both eyes on its prey and begins to creep forwards, even more slowly than usual. Then it opens its mouth just a crack and... So now I'm wondering if you can answer this question. Based on what we just read, how are the chameleon's eyes different from our eyes? Chameleons feed on all sorts of creepy crawlies. The big ones also eat small birds, mice, and even other chameleons. The wop! There goes his tongue ready to catch his prey. Out shoots this amazingly long tongue with a sticky tip at the end, like a piece of well-chewed chewing gum. Then the tongue flies back, and there's a lot of chomping and chewing and perhaps a few bits of insect leg fluttering to the ground. So now I want to know, how does a chameleon catch its prey? Most lizards gulp their food down without chewing it, but chameleons grind everything up thoroughly. And after that, the chameleon just sits there for an hour or two, doing nothing very much at all, looking quite exhausted and still grumpy after all that hard work. And there you have it. How could you possibly resist a pocket-sized, bad-tempered, color-changing, swivel-eyed, snail-paced, long-tongued sharpshooter? If chameleons aren't cool, then I don't know what is. So that was the story, Chameleons Are Cool. I hope you enjoyed it. Today we practiced answering questions about key details in the text, and when you're reading a story on your own, you can not only answer those questions, but you can ask yourself questions too, and this will help you to think more deeply about the information that you're reading and maybe understand it a little bit better. So the next time that you're reading a nonfiction text, try asking and answering questions.